In this video, I'm going to present some new genetic evidence that supports the Book of Mormon. Now, in previous videos and also in my book, Face of a Nephite, I looked at the DNA evidence that exists that relates to the Book of Mormon. And what I found and what I've presented shows that, contrary to popular belief, there is significant DNA evidence that is actually consistent with the Book of Mormon. And in particular, all of the main types of DNA testing for Native Americans shows a partial non-Asian ancestry, which could relate to the Book of Mormon. For example, in the first type of DNA testing, the mitochondrial DNA testing, their Native Americans, at least a portion of them, have what is called mitochondrial DNA haplogroup X, which is a DNA type that can relate to the Middle East. And I've done separate videos on that, and that's also information that's been presented before by Rod Meldrum and others. The second type of DNA testing is the Y chromosome DNA testing, or testing the patrilineal line. That DNA testing showed many Native Americans have Y DNA haplogroup R, which is a DNA type that's not East Asian, so it doesn't fit the common belief or perception that all the Native American ancestry came across from Asia, across the Bering Strait. The haplogroup R, the Y DNA haplogroup R evidence instead fits more with a Caucasian type DNA that exists among Europeans and in the Middle East. Also, a significant number of Jews have that DNA type. So it's another DNA type that could relate to the Book of Mormon and fits the Book of Mormon. A third DNA type of testing is autosomal DNA testing. That DNA testing for Native Americans show that Native Americans throughout the Americas show and have a portion of a DNA type that could relate to the Book of Mormon, in particular, Caucasian DNA types, and in particular, an Eastern Mediterranean DNA type that shows up more than would be expected from the known history. In the book, I also look at blood types and some blood type evidence that supports the Book of Mormon. Now, after I wrote the book, an individual came to me and suggested that I also look at another type of genetic information, which could provide some insight about the Book of Mormon, and that is with human leukocyte antigens. Now, don't worry about the fancy name. So it's basically genes that relate to and have a function with the immune system, but can be looked at. They're genetically passed on and inherited, and they can be looked at for genetic information related to ancestry as well. So because of that suggestion, I've taken a look at that information, and in this video, I'll present the additional information that comes through the genetic testing of the human leukocyte antigens, or HLA, and I'll show that that kind of genetic information fits with and supports what was found in the DNA information presented in the book, namely that it supports the authenticity and historicity of the Book of Mormon. To present that information, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. Before I go into this new genetic information supporting the Book of Mormon, let me just first mention that I will be at the upcoming Book of Mormon Evidence Conference, which is April 17th to 19th in the Sandy, Utah area at the Salt Lake Community College Gail Miller campus. You can find information about that at the bookofmormonevidence.org site. So I will be presenting twice there. It's nice that they did include my picture there. So I'll be presenting on Friday evening and on Saturday evening. And I'll be presenting on Friday evening this is in the church constitution, church history type section. And I'm going to present there information about the signs in the heavens that occurred on September 22nd, 1827, related to the coming forth of the gold plates. I previously have done a video on that can be found if you from my YouTube channel site. About 6 months ago, I did this on the signs in the heaven that occurred on the night that, and in the time frame around when Joseph Smith received the gold plates, and how that fits with that actually occurred on Rosh Hashanah, and which is the Jewish holiday and feast, and there's a lot of symbolism involved with that. So I'll present on that most likely on that Friday evening. And then on Saturday evening in the science religion section, I'm going to present on DNA updated information on DNA evidence and genetic information about the Book of Mormon. So it'll include some of what we're talking about here today. And I hope to see you there. If you do go, take the opportunity to come up and say hi and introduce yourself. I'd love to meet some of you in person. Okay, so let's take a look at the genetic information that can be obtained from these human leukocyte antigens. So as indicated, the human leukocyte antigens, often abbreviated HLA, can be used to trace ancestry. We don't have to go at a high, very deep in terms of understanding the biological genetic information about it. The important thing is that the information can be used and are used to trace migrations in human population, because they create this sort of, they're genetically passed on, and they create this sort of fingerprints. This is from the Wikipedia article about them, and it just explains that if you want to look at what they do, they're essentially these genes that are involved in the immune system. So they help with the immune system, and they're in the cells, and they get passed down. Okay, so looking up the scientific studies which have been done related to ancestry using these HLA or human leukocyte antigens, there's a good article that was produced, and it's this one here, the single haplotype admixture models using large-scale HLA genotype frequencies. And this is basically human population studies using these this HLA genetic information, and we'll show you what they found here. So I'll scroll through this a little bit. The article's down here, and so as it says here, just like we showed, the anthropologists, they'll use HLA to trace population migrations and evolution. It talks about one of the complications is that recent admixture of populations can make it harder to determine what the ancestry and original populations were. They propose and present a model that they came up with to try to filter that out, to try to help figure and determine what the original populations were. And we'll skip through a lot of the complex information here, but I'll note that as we get down, so we'll skip through the processes and the math and so forth that they use. But as we get down into the findings, we get to the results. And then they'll show, this isn't focusing just on Native Americans, this is more of a worldwide set, but they do make some comments related to Native Americans in particular. And they talk about some of the interesting things that they found. And they say here that one of the interesting things that they found was there was an interesting proximity between American Indians and European populations, and a significant European type ancestry in that's found in Native American populations. So this is another way of saying, or a simpler way of saying this, is that one of the surprising things that they found, but in fact, which has actually been found in the DNA information, which I presented in the book and in prior videos, is that while the expectation was that Native Americans would have an entirely Asian ancestry, except for only very recent intermixture with Europeans post-Columbus. Instead, what they were finding was that Native Americans have a much closer ancestry to European populations. They say European populations, but the genetic markers that they're looking at for European populations are actually found in Middle Eastern and Jewish populations as well. But they found this surprising high level of non-Asian ancestry in Native Americans. And then they'll skip a little, well, they'll talk about it just a little bit more, and then we'll show it where it shows up in the figures that are used in their study. So if we scroll down further in the study, so they present here. Okay, so as they say here, right here is the key part. So what they found was that Native Americans, they were finding as much as a 50% or over 50% Caucasian or European type contribution for Native American ancestry or populations. And they're actually finding that also with the Aboriginal populations in the Australia area as well. And so they interpret this as being extremely large, recent mixture post-Columbus. And then they also say, well, maybe it's also that many of the self-identified Native Americans are actually not Native American. And so what this is an example of is they're getting data. They're showing that there are really high levels of non-Asian ancestry among the Native Americans, and they don't really know what to do with that because they're not open to considering like the Book of Mormon describes. And so instead, what they say is, well, one way to explain this would be that maybe a lot of these self-identified Native Americans aren't really Native American, and then combine that with there must have been a massive amount of European Native American mixture post-Columbus. But the more logical or easier explanation, if you accept the Book of Mormon, is to recognize that Native Americans are not solely descended from individuals that came across from Asia across the Bering Strait, but instead have a significant portion of non-Asian ancestry. And so it fits the Book of Mormon. Now we'll go ahead and take a look down at their figure, which shows this. This is down in the figure 1B. So we'll go down to 1B. Now in reading 1B, the figure, we also have to look for the abbreviations that are looking for the populations that we're looking for, because this is a worldwide study. So in particular, the populations we want to look at are the American Indians, the U.S. American Indians that are in South or Central America. And this is this abbreviation, the USAISC. And then we also want to look at the American Indians that are in U.S. North America, this USAMIND. We're not looking at U.S. South Asian. This would be those that are in the U.S. who have an ancestry from India. That's not what we want. What we want are the American Indians. It'd be these two abbreviations, those in the South Central America and those the North American Indians. So look at for these two abbreviations in the figure. So let's go down to the figure. Okay, this is it. Okay, so the two we want to focus on the U.S. North American Indians, and then the South American Indians in South and Central America. These are the fifth and sixth from the right. So these are these two columns. And what it's showing is that for these Native Americans, when you look at their total ancestry, green represents European markers. So what you're showing here is a majority of what their ancestry looks like, at least related to these human leukocyte antigens. As far as the HLA is concerned, they look majority of a European or Caucasian type ancestry, and not of certainly not the Asian or other kind of ancestry. So what this does is this gives yet another witness or another voice to show that Native Americans aren't just descendants of those from Asia that came across the Bering Strait, but there is instead a very significant non-Asian ancestry component for Native Americans. Perhaps even a majority in some locations, and other locations it shows less, but which actually makes them much closer to Caucasian populations. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how this finding matches with some of the DNA findings. So if you go and take a look at the autosomal DNA testing, and this is something I've presented in prior presentations. This figure is also in that Face of a Nephite book. If you look at autosomal DNA testing, when they look at the world populations, what they did here is these are all, to the right, these are all South American, Central American populations, the Maya there, for example. And then on the far left are Native Americans that are from the northeastern portion of North America. And what they did with the autosomal testing is they put the coloring showing kind of markers that are indicative of ancestral groups. And the blue coloring was the color that they used to show that there are markers found typical for people with European, Middle Eastern, or Central Asian type Caucasian ancestries. And so what it shows is that for Native Americans throughout the Americas, there are significant portions of this blue, right? So what's that showing is that as each Native American they test makes a skinny little column, all right? And as they test the ancestry for all of these different Native Americans, a significant portion of them are popping up that have, these are self-identified pure Native American ancestry. And of those, even who are self-identifying as pure Native American ancestry, a significant portion of them are popping up with this blue Caucasian type genetic markers in there that are showing up. And it is especially so for those that are in the Algonquin tribes in Northeast and North America, where you see that essentially all of them are showing significant portions of this blue Caucasian type ancestry, which could come from Europeans or from the Middle East or Central Asia. The pink relates to Eastern Asia. So what you're also seeing is that there is a significant Eastern Asian portion, but there's a lot of Caucasian type ancestry as well, making a mixed ancestry. Okay, so that's from the autosomal testing. Let me show you the same thing. So this is from my book. This is just from one of the chapters I'm going to show you. This is in chapter 3 of the book. And I'm just going to show you and read with you the highlighted portions that talk about what was found when looking at the Y chromosome, the patrilineal line DNA testing, and how that fits with what we just saw from the autosomal testing and then this new genetic testing that was through the human leukocyte antigens. So as it says here in this Y chromosome DNA testing for Native Americans, a significant portion of Native Americans test as a Y DNA haplogroup R, which is traditionally considered a European or Caucasian DNA type. A high percentage of Jewish men have this Y DNA haplogroup type. So a high percentage of Jewish men have this DNA type. And so this DNA testing points to Native American DNA that's not Asian in origin and could be connected to the Book of Mormon people. And the citations for this are right down here in 19 and 20. So you see the citations here, for example, with a Jewish population, 30% of Ashkenazi Jews have this DNA type. This DNA type is 10 to 30% in most Israeli populations and so forth. And those are the peer-reviewed studies that show that information. Okay, and then continuing, despite this information, so the mainstream science is still commonly assuming that, well, this must have come since recent, just since Columbus, right? Recent admixture. But this is beginning to change as some of the experts are noting some of the additional information which points to this instead being more from ancient ancestry or from an original population. And so, for example, in one DNA study, one of the, I think one of the tribes of the Algonquin tribes, the scientists were surprised to find that the tribe had over 60% of the Native American men having this Caucasian European Y-DNA type R, even though each of the subjects to be selected and studied had to self-identify as pure ancestry. So these are people in the tribe. They are self-identifying, yes, I have pure Native American ancestry. And they took the study, and with this Algonquin tribe, over 60% of them had these DNA types that's showing a Caucasian European type contribution for their ancestry. And so in the study, the scientists are, they question and argue, is this post-Columbus? Could you really have this much post-Columbus ancestry? And the scientists in this particular study said they thought that was unlikely because if you had the majority of the descendants coming from this European admixture, you wouldn't have preserved the cultural identity of that population. And in particular, with the particular tribe they were testing there, if you were known to be of, the result of mixture with a white man who married, or had the child, you were not considered part of the tribe. So to stay in the tribe, you actually had to be considered or thought or understood or thought to be the descendant of a man from the tribe. And these were people who thought they had pure ancestry. So while you might not be surprised to see a little bit of European admixture post-Columbus, when you're getting over 60% of the men testing with this Native American, testing with this ancestry that really fits more with a Caucasian type that could come from Europe, or there's a lot of Jews that have this DNA type. It's baffling for the mainstream science. And then in addition, when they further studied the DNA, what they found was that a number of the what they were seeing included mutations or variety that indicated that it had been there for a long time. In addition, when they looked, they said, if you really had this much European interaction, there are lots of European DNA types, right? So Europeans don't just have Y-DNA-R. Europeans have lots of different DNA types. And so if you really had the majority of the Native Americans from this recent admixture with Europeans, you would expect the Native Americans to be having a lot of European DNA types because there must be a lot of intermixture. But no, all they're seeing is the Y-DNA-R. So it strains plausibility to think that there is a ton of recent admixture with Europeans, but only with Europeans that have the Y-DNA-R haplotype. It just doesn't make sense. So the more sensible, logical explanation is that this Y-DNA-R is actually a Native American DNA type, at least going back anciently, where it would have had then some connection to Caucasians, whether through Europe or the Middle East or Central Asia. Okay, and then in terms of and here are if you're interested in the peer-reviewed literature documents with this information, that's right there for you. And so as they said here, and this is in the Bordellini peer-reviewed study in the American Journal of Human Genetics, it said that a high level of recent European ancestry would be expected to introduce other lineages that are common in Europe. These are not observed. So it supports that this is not the result of recent admixture with Europeans. So that's what I just explained. And then looking at the mutations, they found that a lot of this DNA that was found among Native Americans had these mutations as well that are not found in the Old World. So then that means, well, how could this come from the old world then if you have these mutations that exist with the Native Americans, but it's not found in the old world? It means it really must have come and happened here in America. So they thought, well, maybe you could justify one or two mutational steps away, but when you're talking about several mutational steps away from whatever is found in Europe, then it pretty much has to be old. So as I say here, the fact that the DNA had had enough time among Native Americans to significantly mutate in ways that are not found in Europe shows that this DNA logically must have existed in the Native Americans before the arrival of Europeans. Indeed, analysis done of the haplogroup R found in one of the tribes showed that as many as 8 mutational steps had occurred away from any known Caucasian or European DNA type, which is the closest related DNA elsewhere in the world. And the peer-reviewed citation for that is at 28 there. So this is this particular one where they said of the 62 findings of the Y-DNA-R haplotype in their test among the Native Americans, 5 of them were 4 to 8 mutational steps away from what was found in Europe. And then also this other one indicating that because of the high level of mutations, this would not be expected if these were all recent European introductions. Okay, so hopefully that's not too complicated for you. Now I have, if you're interested in more detail on this, on the DNA stuff, these are some of the first videos I did on this channel. So if you went to my channel, the videos, and you looked at the oldest ones, the first videos I did, this is where I have several videos that go further on this. So on this particular one, video went into the autosomal DNA. I spent more time on that. This one goes into the blood type evidence related to the Book of Mormon. This one went into the mitochondrial DNA evidence related to the Book of Mormon. And this one went into the Y chromosome DNA evidence related to the Book of Mormon. Okay, so I'll go ahead and stop share there. So the bottom line is, in this video, I've presented a new finding, this time with human leukocyte antigens. And the finding from the human leukocyte antigens, when you look at the Native Americans, what they found was that it was surprisingly closer to Caucasian groups and non-Asian groups than they had expected. And in fact, the finding was so close and so high that they started to wonder that, well, maybe a lot of these people who claim to be Native American aren't even Native American, and then also looking at maybe the amount of interaction and intermixture post-Columbus was much, much higher than would be expected. But that same thing, since that same thing occurred in the DNA studies, if you look at that human leukocyte antigen information in combination in connection with the Y chromosome DNA testing, the answer is clear, which is that Native Americans have a mixed ancestry with a very significant portion of the ancestry coming from Caucasian type groups and not just across the Bering Strait from Asia. And so this information, particularly with the information connecting some of those DNA types to Jewish groups and to Israel, really is supportive of and consistent with the Book of Mormon. I'm not saying it proves the Book of Mormon true. That's not really the point of this evidence that I'm presenting. The point of the evidence I'm presenting is to help you to understand that the evidence, the scientific evidence, actually is consistent with the Book of Mormon and does support its truth. But the testimony, your main testimony, obviously will come through the Spirit. All right, I hope to see you at the upcoming Book of Mormon Evidence Conference, April 17th to 19th. And if not, I encourage you to like and subscribe and leave some comments too. I look forward to your comments or suggestions. Thanks.